Well, so, I mean, that's the whole question. I said yesterday in my video, the report kind of stopped right before what a lot of us have suspected for a long time, which is someone is kind of, or not someone, but there's some coordination, there's some control here. So who's like pulling the strings? Who's showing people how to not get picked up by like Twitter algorithms? Who's, choosing these hashtags? Who's coordinating all these people to go dislike a video with Meghan reading a book to children? Like, who's doing that?
Right. I mean, that's a huge question. And I don't know, maybe, I mean, the person who reported on this seems to be pretty digging into it. Yeah. So, hopefully that'll continue and we'll have some good investigative journalism that barely seems to exist anymore.
Well, yeah, and I think, they talked about how there's multiple royal reporters who interact regularly with these just hate accounts. And I mean, they're not, I want to get to talking about the difference between like negative commentary and hate because they're not the same. But you have these royal reporters who are following these Twitter accounts that have, altered photos as their header and, have these horrible names. So it's not like they're not hidden. It's not secretive that these are hate accounts. And it seems a little bit circular with, Omid Scobie said the other day that he had seen like private messages between some of these hate accounts and an author. And it seemed like what the hate accounts had said had actually impacted the author's work. So these hate accounts are being used as like sources.
Well, and I think it's one thing. I mean, I think there could be a valid argument that maybe you follow some of these accounts just to keep an eye on them. But if you're actually interacting with them and having conversation other than, hey, what the hell's your problem? I think that's problematic.
Well, it's problematic, and when those hate accounts that literally just exist to hate a certain people are now being pulled into mainstream news as fact, as sources, that's crazy.
Yeah, except I sort of feel like that's been going on in the political world in the United States for a long time.
Oh, well, yeah, there's always, I think one of the reasons I'm so interested in like Harry and Meghan is there's all these parallels between what they went through. Like when people talk about like culture wars and stuff, I mean, there's always been these parallels between, like I see a lot of parallels between Harry and Meghan and like the Obamas with like, oh, we just don't like them. We can't tell you why, but we just don't like them. Like there's just a lot of parallels between them and like the political world. But like in the royal world, like these hate accounts will make guesses on how much Meghan's jewelry costs. It's a guess. And then the next day there's an article in the Daily Mail citing anonymous sources or some bullshit with those numbers.
Right. Plus, newsflash, rich people spend ridiculous amounts of money on all kinds of things. And I'm not sure why we only point it out. Well, I do know why we only point it out, but I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the earliest strikes is they started doing that early on where, Kate Middleton would come out with like, a new everything, full face of makeup, and they would, only count the rewear. That's it. And then Meghan Markle would come out in something and they would count everything on her body with guesses. And then be like, oh my God, look how much makeup she's wearing when, Kate was wearing just as much. That was an early thing.
I mean, I don't know.
Maybe not more, but poorly applied.
I think well, maybe that's why. I feel like I've seen Kate wearing way more makeup than I've seen Meghan wearing, or at least.
Well, no, I mean, I think they both wear pretty full faces of makeup. Just one is better applied than the other.
Yeah. Well, and also see everybody else who's in the public view.
Yeah.
They all do that.
Yeah. But it's only a problem when a certain person does it. That's the whole thing.
That's the problem.
But then the other thing, which also has parallels to the political world, is the insistence that all negative commentary is like. So one thing that really frustrates me is, like all say, hey, Kate Middleton looks really thin. This is concerning. She looks very thin. What the heck? There's history here of Windsor's not being nice to royal wives. Why is Kate Middleton so skinny? And then someone on the deranged side will be like, Megan's pregnancy was faked. It was a moon bump. We should go kick her in the stomach. And someone will come along and say both those statements are the same.
Right.
Which is really frustrating.
Yes.
Or, we go, hey, William and Kate aren't working, and here are the numbers, and they're not working as much as they should have. And then someone will come along and with like a fake photo and be like, Harry and Meghan are getting a divorce. Here's this fake photo, blah, blah, blah. And again, it seems like there's a certain core of people that are like, it's the same. It's the same. And it's not the same.
Well, again, I mean, we're going to keep coming back to this because it's true and because it's just how the world is these days, at least in the United States, is we have this both sidesism. And everybody thinks that if you're ever going to talk about anything publicly, apparently, or write anything in a newspaper or say anything, you have to take both sides into account. And that, and if someone comes out and says the earth is flat, you're not allowed to say that's bull. You have to present their view along with the, people who realize, and I mean, like has been very constantly mentioned on Twitter and elsewhere. If you're a reporter and someone tells you it's raining outside and someone tells you it's not your job to report both of those. It's your job to look out the window and figure out which is right.
Yes.
Because there are actually facts in the world and there are actually things you can verify, and there aren't always two sides to an argument, especially if that argument is something based on science or actual facts, or there might be nuances, there might be opinions about what you should do with this data, but there aren't two valid sides to every argument. And when someone has a ridiculous opinion, like that the earth is flat, or that, I don't know, that climate change isn't real, or whatever, you don't always have to present that ridiculous argument when you're talking about what's real and what's true.
Yeah.
And so I think just automatically the knee jerk with almost everything is, well, you said something bad about them, so us saying something bad about the other side is all the same, even when.
But it's more like that false equivalence, which
right.
My whole video yesterday was about. Not all negative commentary is hate, and
right.
There's a difference. And whenever you say something negative that people are like, okay, well, this is all hate, it's all the same, is
right.
bull. And
right.
very frustrating.
Right.
Because it makes it hard to deal with hate when everything negative is seen as hate and equivalent.
Right. And I mean, just like it's one thing to say, I'm just trying to think of an example. I mean, it's just, one side is truly deranged on a lot of things. I mean, like you could criticize, for example, let's say Hillary Clinton, and say, I think Hillary Clinton's position on foreign affairs and international relations, she seems somewhat hawkish to me, and she's a centrist, and I'm more of a lefty, and I disagree with her positions. And that's one thing.
Yeah.
But to say that Hillary Clinton and John Podesta run a pedophile ring in the basement of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. is nonsense, and it's dangerous. I mean, because then, as happened, someone shows up there with a gun.
Yeah.
And then, as with all the right-wing hate speech and tolerance of that in the United States, we get people like yesterday where this guy stands up at a conference and says, when can we start shooting people? And it's serious.
Yeah.
So...
but that's the same.
I don't think criticizing people for like policies or for working hard or for even, hey, Kate seems to be having issues that eerily parallel her deceased mother-in-law, and perhaps we should be concerned about that, is a whole lot different than riling people up over the color of someone's skin and trying to make them believe ridiculous things that, at least in the United States, those sort of things can lead to violence.
Yes.
And it's a whole different... Nobody, because you say, I think Kate's too thin and something should happen, or that people should, be
attention.
concerned or pay attention. No one's going to go start, shooting up Kensington Palace. But especially here in the United States, if someone is constantly saying that someone, especially someone of color, probably especially a woman, if you start attributing things to them that are nonsensical and ridiculous, you're inciting passions in people that have a history of turning violent. And that's an entirely different thing.
Yes. Okay. Well, so like in the Oprah interview, they repeatedly brought up security. And so I feel like there are things that have happened that we don't know about. And so it was repeatedly, has our risk profile changed? No. And you're taking our security away. Yeah. And while helping incite racially motivated hatred against us. It's not the same.
No, it's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. It's awful.
Well, and what's frustrating is we're not asking these platforms to do anything crazy. We're just asking them to enforce their own rules.
Right. Which
is, you're supposedly not allowed to coordinate to do targeted harassment. Again, these YouTube, creators or channels that have, 80,000, 100,000 people. I mean, this is their main source of income. They're making a living inciting hatred. They're identifiable. We're just asking these social media platforms to enforce their own rules.
Yeah.
Supposed rules.
And, hopefully maybe that'll happen. Supposedly people are paying more attention. Supposedly Congress is paying more attention. Maybe they'll start, breaking up some of these big companies, Facebook. And, I think in general, Twitter makes a little bit of an effort, but they clearly need to do way more. And hopefully people will continue to investigate things like this and then continue to push to where,
just enforce your own rules.
Gets done. Right.
And they have all these they have so many analytical tools at their hand. Yeah. This whole we just don't see them, we can't find them is such crap to me.
Well, the bottom line is what's come out of all this Facebook stuff. The anger and the hate and the divisiveness drives views, drives engagement, and the bottom line, almost the bottom line of everything, is they want to make money.
Yes.
And so if engagement is driven by the hatred and the divisiveness and the bullying and the engagement, then, I might have said that twice, sorry. And that's the road that leads them to even more
money,
even more ridiculous wealth, they will continue down that road. And that's just the unfortunate fact of the world. Money makes the world go round.
Thank you. Well, but especially on Twitter, it's pretty hard to you can use Twitter to direct people to monetized things, but it comes back to this coordination of, it is very hard for me to believe that someone is going through all this work. Tweeting hundreds, thousands of times a day, being online 24/7, without there being some kind of financial incentive there. They either are so consumed by hate, it's obscene, or they're being paid to do that.
Right, because the users of Twitter, there's really no way to monetize that. Twitter obviously can monetize it because they have ads, etc. But you're right. There's almost always there's a money motivation behind so many things. Yeah. And clearly they just want to drive engagement. So, one thing I read yesterday, and I'm sure everyone who's more tech savvy than I knows this, is, never, ever, ever retweet these folks. If you want to point out what they said, take a screenshot and then put that in your own stuff, because by retweeting this, all that kind of stuff, you're just driving the engagement. And since engagement makes the world go round, that leads to these awful accounts or people or whatever having higher engagement. And that's bad.
Yeah, don't retweet, screenshot, and...
Oops, sorry.
Don't retweet, screenshot always. Don't click on articles. If it's a negative article, don't click on it. And then The other thing, too, though, that I find interesting is when you start arguing with these people, the first thing they say to you is, oh, Harry and Meghan must be paying you. Which I feel like is projection. like the first thing they're like, oh, well.
Yeah.
But I make this plea every time we talk about it. If Harry and Meghan wanted to start paying me, I am open. I take many forms of payment.
Yes. Well, if the right wing's middle name is hypocrisy, their other middle name is projection. Because that is what completely motivates them.
All right. Well, we have to get going. Thanks for listening to our Thursday ranting.
And just my final political plug of the day. If you're an American and you want to blame somebody for not having paid family leave, could we please blame the Republicans who are 100% opposed to it, and not, while we can hate on the one or two Democrats that are horrible, terrible people, it's the fact that 50 Republican senators and however 190 some or 200 whatever Republican congresspeople don't want any of this to happen. So let's celebrate today if we get a bill passed that has a lot of good stuff in it, including around childcare and child tax credits for families, and let's not just blame the Democrats. Thank you very much. That was
Eat your heart out, Casey Hunt.
That was my American PSA for the day.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.